Joining us now is Gerald Celente. He is author of the Trends Journal, Trend Tracking, and Trends 2000. Gerald, we're stuck on Europe here, but I have to ask you about it right away. What are your thoughts on what's happening in Europe?
Well, Eric, the big news that's not making the news is what's really going on, and that is the formation of a European central bank in the same fashion as the United States Central Bank. Of course, there's the ECB now. But what's really going on now, it's not about bailing out the banks of Spain or Italy or Greece or Ireland or Portugal. No, that's not what that last G20 meeting was all about. Sure, they're getting some bailout money, but you know who's really being bailed out? Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Societe Generale. That's why the French are pushing so hard for it. Daxia, that's why the Dutch are pushing so hard for it. And they're making it all seem like, oh, the Germans are bending, oh, and they're in control now, and they're going to stop the progression of the Eurozone. That's a lot of camouflage. The Germans are into it just as everybody else. You see, it's Dexia, it's Societe Generale, it's Deutsche Bank, it's Commerzbank, it's all these banks that loan the money to the Italian banks, the Greek banks, the Spanish banks. You see, they're the loan sharks at the higher top of the pyramid, loaning the street guy, like the street guys are like Spain and Italy. Those are the other loan sharks. So the top loan sharks loan down to the smaller loan sharks. The smaller loan sharks can't get their money back, and the big guys want their dough. That's all this is. So you see, it's a big camouflage because what they're doing now is they're forming a central bank in Brussels. All of the countries are going to be losing their banking sovereignty. And just like they've lost it in the United States, they're all under the thumb of the central bank. And then you go look what's happened over there in the UK with the LIBOR scandal that just happened. And, you 99% of the people wouldn't know a LIBOR if it hit them in the head. They don't know what this is about. Oh, you mean rigging the interest rates? Yeah. And you know what that means? Well, it just affects just a couple of billion people. Everybody with auto loans, car loans, mortgages. You go down the line. And now we find out that the whole thing's a rigged game, which I've been saying for years. It's a rigged game. And what people don't realize is the banks have taken over the world. It's as simple as that. It's in broad daylight. The financial crime syndicate is in charge. So actually the words of Rothschild, he wrote some 200 years ago, quote, "The few who can understand the system will be either so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class." Exactly. They're all in the game together. While on the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system, will bear its burden without complaint and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical to their interests.
Gerald, let me ask you something. When you read a quote like that, he was right.
He hit it right on the head. He knew it. And he also said, let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws. You get it? The people have become vassals to the bankers, but they still like to call it freedom and democracy. It's a takeover. The central banks of Europe are now being established in Brussels. All of the nations are losing their sovereignty. The same thing like we've lost our sovereignty in the United States. Hey, I got one for you, Eric. I'll play that I'm Henry Paulson, and I'm going to be the Treasury Secretary of the United States of America under the George Bush administration back in 2008. And I'm going to come up with this big fairy tale that if we don't save the banks, the entire banking system is going to collapse. They're too big to fail. Let's suspend capitalism. and we'll bail out the big banks. They need our money. Now the big banks have become yet bigger. It's a takeover. Nothing like it in history. Look at the LIBOR scandal. And it's out of the news already.
Gerald, let me ask you this question. When you look at how this is unfolded, I know that it causes you a great deal of stress because you're trying to wake people up around the world to this because you feel morally obligated to do so, but it's a bit of a desperate cause, a lost cause. Doesn't it feel that way at times?
Yes, and I've come down to the reasoning why. And it all goes back to the human spirit because we're in a time of immorality. And I know you don't get into politics or wars, but hey, let's not turn a blind eye to them. I got an idea. Next time call me up on a Tuesday when I'm not doing Terrorist Tuesday and looking for suspected militants in foreign countries that I could send Predator drones over to kill. And I'll play president. And this is against the Geneva Conventions. Everything that happened after World War II, the Nuremberg trials, has been suspended. And I'm not only saying that, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, among others, who, for those of you who don't know who he is, who's the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan, and a contributor to the Trends Journal. And others are saying the same thing. It's the individual spirit. When people act in a moral way, and I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about simply doing unto others you would have them do unto you, then it changes. But right now, to me, people lack courage, dignity, respect, integrity, and passion. And that's why they're letting all this stuff unfold in front of them, and they don't want to become involved. I had a driver taking me to the airport recently, and he was complaining about what's going on. And in the same breath, he said, well, I'm so busy. I don't have time to go out into the streets like these other people do and complain. I got work to do. I said, oh, cut it out. Give me a break. I said, who are you talking to over here? I said, you never sit down in front of the TV and watch your baseball or football games? I said, save it, man.
Let me ask you this. You brought up briefly earlier the fact that there was some trouble with the market rigging scandal that was happening right now over in the LIBOR. But, Gerald, you've been involved in gold for a long time. I know through this cycle, it's the only way to survive is to have physical gold. The gold market is rigged. We've known it's rigged. I know. They manage that market. This LIBOR scandal, it comes as a shock to people, but all of these markets are managed, including gold.
Exactly. They're showing you it's rigged. It's rigged. And not only is it rigged between the banks, as we're finding out with that guy Diamond from Barclays, he was in contact with the Bank of England cats. And they were in contact with the Fed. Everybody knows what's going on here. It's only the little kiddies who still believe in their leaders and their government. And there's no collusion, by the way. There's no collusion between government and the banks. It's not like there's this great collusion going on. It's all the same. There's no difference between them. You go back to our trend alert when they first started coming out with this too big to fail nonsense, and our headline read, Wall Street's hijacked Washington. They're all the same. It's one gang. It's the mafia. It's the financial mafia. They're in control.
Speaking of gold, Gerald, and the way that market is active, we continue to see the Chinese accumulating along with other big money. As these markets go down, I'm getting reports from certain dealers that the big money is coming in and just making some large purchases. It's sporadic, but they're buying right along with the Chinese.
Not only the Chinese, but so too are central banks. There are a number of central banks around the world that are buying gold. And again, you're right, it's manipulated. In India also, they're making it more and more difficult to buy gold. And that's one of the heaviest gold-buying countries in the world because the rupee is under such attack. The whole game is rigged. How much more proof do people need? When are they going to grow up? You saw what happened under the Bush administration. You saw what happened under the Obama administration. We found out how many times because of the legislation, the one-time legislation that forced the Federal Reserve to show what they were doing, about the trillions of dollars that they were dumping into the system to keep pumping it up that we had no idea about. Of course it's rigged. Again, go back to the LIBOR scandal. They were lying about the severity of the crisis by rigging the numbers. If you or I did this, it would be a criminal activity. But when the white shoe boys do it, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I'll be more vigilant later. As they say, That's what that little creep who just left Barclays said. He said, I'm sorry. I'm not making that up. He said, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. Yeah, it won't happen again because they forced him out.
Gerald, we did have the job numbers come out today in the United States, but when you look at the globe, you and I have been saying for some time, this economy's off a cliff. It's going to stay off of a cliff.
Again, look at the numbers came out. You know, I get a kick out of these people. I don't want to mention any names. I watched CNBC as the numbers rolled out this morning. And they were looking at 125,000, 120,000 jobs created. It came in at like 80,000 jobs, you know. And by the way, the government only shed 4,000 jobs. So we still got all this fat in the government, right? They're still taking our tax money to give to the government people so they could keep taking more money from us so they have more of them on the job. So now the numbers come in really terrible, and you hear one of these prostitutes after another say, well, you know, the numbers could have been a lot worse. Oh, well, at least it wasn't as bad as some people expected. Oh, you know, gasoline prices are down. So, you know, that eases the pain for some people. They have to create 150,000 jobs just to stay even. I'll tell you what, Eric. If my track record was as bad as any of theirs, I would have been laughed out of business a long time ago. Try this one on for size. Do you remember Team Obama when they came out with the stimulus program? You know what the unemployment rate was supposed to be now? It's at 8.2%, but when you look at John Williams' shadow stats, it's really 22%. You know what that was supposed to be according to the experts? Right now, as we speak, 5.2%. Gee, son of a gun, you're really off on that, aren't you? Hey, but you know, there's things going on over there in Europe that we didn't anticipate. Come on, what are you kidding me? It's a global slowdown. Yep, look, in the last week, China, they announced interest rate cuts. The ECB announced interest rate cuts. India announced more stimulus. The UK announced more stimulus and bond buying. This whole thing is collapsing. That's why I'm in gold. And I don't tell anybody what to do. I don't give financial advice. It's the way I see it. And the way I see it is the criminal gang that's running the show can't keep it from collapsing. And this LIBOR scandal should be the story of the 21st century. Everyone on the planet was affected by this criminal activity. Oh, let's not call it a crime. These were financiers.
Gerald, you have your piece that you put out 4 times a year with the Trends Journal, and it's really amazing, about 45 pages each time, roughly, plus or minus. For people that want to get involved in that, how do they do that?
Trendsjournal.com, trendsjournal.com. We're coming out with the summer issue less than 2 weeks. We're telling people now, you better prepare for what's coming up, because some people are waiting for the presidential election and thinking that things are going to turn around with a new president, old president. You know, Greenberg, Iceberg, there's no difference, man. You know, it's all going to be the same. It's only going to worsen. And take a lesson from what just happened in France. We had that guy over there, Hollande, say, all these great things he was going to do and how he was going to be against austerity measures and higher taxes. He's not even in there a month, and they have more austerity measures and higher taxes. So you better prepare for what's ahead. You know my motto, think for yourself. And if you're listening to the prostitutes and the politicians, well, I guess you're going to get what you deserve.
Gerald Celente, author of the Trends Journal, Trend Tracking, and Trends 2000. Thank you for joining us on King World News.
Eric, it's always a pleasure being on with you. Thanks so much for having me.